Hello, guys. Welcome to Aspora Talks. Today, I'm here with a special guest named Adam. Can you briefly introduce yourself to the audience for those of us who don't really know who you are?
Sure. Yeah. So like in previous careers, I was a software developer and a project manager, and then I left that to study law to become an attorney. And I figured out pretty quickly I didn't want to do that. And so while still in law school, I discovered coaching and found my way into that career. And I've been working as an executive coach and teaching and developing leadership through coaching for the last 12 years or so.
Wow, wow. That's an interesting transition from a code developer, law, and then a leadership coach. Just out of curiosity, I think sometimes in life we discover who we are by trying multiple things. Eventually we nail it to say, okay, maybe this is where my passion is. And
Hmm.
but you have to go through multiple career paths for you to discover, because most times people just want to jump into their purpose when they have not really discovered what makes them effective, what makes them perform at a higher level. Because one thing about leadership that I've learned is leadership is all about the two P's, purpose and people. So, just out of curiosity, do you think that you being a leadership coach, that's something that you discover on your way after multiple other career paths on your journey of life?
Yeah, like I would say it's not that I didn't love working in software. Like I really liked writing code and that, and I even found studying law is very interesting to study because you're kind of studying the operating system that our society runs on, which is fascinating. It's very buggy software, it turns out,
Yeah.
but it I think you're exactly on the money where we're kind of trained growing up not to don't get it wrong. And so we become afraid to take a swing and step into a career because we're worried, like, what if I get trapped and then I'm 60 and I don't have any money for retirement and I hated my life and blah, blah, blah. And, but like, the, to your point, the greatest gifts I've been given are each time I pursued something, I found what I liked about it and what I didn't. And then when I was ready to move on, I moved on. And um, yeah, it took 3 careers before I found what I'm doing now. And this is truly you speak of purpose. This is what I'm here for. This is the purpose for me.
I can also relate with your story, because I myself I studied international business. I've always wanted
Mm,
to work in the banking industry, but it never happened. And I ended up becoming a chef, working in the food industry, owning my own catering business. And then
mm,
from being a chef to being a media photographer, videographer, I'm still doing that as a side also. And now
yeah.
I'm into property management and real estate, you know. But leadership has been something ever since I was a child, where people would just look at me and say, you like taking the initiatives to make things happen. You like solving people's problems, right? Sometimes you might not see yourself as a leader. People have to identify that attribute in you. And if you take it seriously, you want to pursue to develop that gift, that ability that you have in you. And I think that's the path that I'm taking now. And I do
Mm,
find pleasure in doing that, because even leadership, like I said, applies to every facet of life. You know,
yes.
there you can apply leadership in the military setting, you can apply leadership in business. And I know that today we're talking about applying leadership in an entrepreneurship point of view. But leadership applies to every application: community, church based, whatever, religious organizations, government institutions, education, right? Even the type of job that you're doing, you apply leadership, right? So this leads me to the question: how important leadership is in our society.
Mm. I'd love to add just a few more places that we often don't think leadership applies, and then I'll come back to your question. So
Absolutely.
like we can practice what I would call the being of leader. Like, who am I being? I'm practicing being a leader with myself. I can practice
Mm,
bringing the being of leadership to the way I'm with finances. Like, do I budget or do I honor my word when I say I'm going to do something? I can practice bringing leadership to my romantic relationship with my wife or my husband or my cat or, whatever. And so those are places we often don't think there's the opportunity to practice leadership, but it's everywhere. To your point, it's always available. So that's cool to me because it means it can be very rich. If we start to practice with this, there's all of these places that we can start to create more power in our lives, more leadership.
Before you answer that question,
Yeah,
my favorite mentor, John C. Maxwell, says that everything rises and falls on leadership. And he also
yeah,
states that leadership is about influence. So we influence each other directly or indirectly each and every day. So just wanted to highlight on the point that personal leadership is very, very important. How do we influence our own decision making? Like you mentioned, our finances, even our pets, even our relationship, right? So
yeah,
the broad scope of leadership that is so applicable in every facet of life that sometimes we don't really sit back and see the importance of leadership. So that's why I want to know from your end how important, how vital, how crucial is leadership in our society today, especially this day and age that we find ourselves with the pandemic, with so many social changes going on, with the economy turned down. So many things are happening in our world that the society is crying out for leadership,
yeah,
people that will step up and make a difference.
yeah. And I would like, so as a starting point, I would contrast leadership with what we might call like, this isn't a very good term because it sort of makes people feel bad, but like victimhood, which is like where things are happening to me. A better way to describe it is like where my life is at the effect of stuff happening. So like, oh, I would do this except X, Y, and Z. If only this stuff was different, then I would be doing this in my life, which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with living our life from that place, but it's not very empowered. We don't feel like we can really create the world the way we want. And so that's the first thing I want to draw out. And then the second thing I would say is that so much of our world these days is sort of set up with this idea, I'm going to tell you what you should do. We all like want to give advice to each other and you should be more loving and you over there should do more of this and you should do that and follow my advice. And advice is really cheap. And I don't know about you, Raheem, but when I get advice, I'm like, no, stop telling me what to do. I naturally have resistance. And I notice that tends to be very human. When people tell us to do something, our
Mm.
natural inclination is like, no, I'm going to get off of me. Don't tell me what to do. What's beautiful about leadership is it's the practice of modeling something. It's the
Mm.
practice of going first. And so it's a lot like Mahatma Gandhi taught us, which is be the change we want to see in the world. And that's easy for us to say. We can say that easily, but it's a lot harder, when I notice, let's say I notice someone in the parking lot is being rude to someone else, and I want to go and tell them, like, stop being rude, you should be kind. What leadership suggests we do is take a look at my life, Adam, and where do I notice I'm being kind of unkind? Like, are there people that maybe I'm not being that kind with and I could be kinder there? Or am I being unkind to myself? Or am I being unkind to my cat? Or, whatever. And what's beautiful about that is that's what causes change. Not me telling people you should go and be nicer, but when someone sees me kind of being frustrated and impatient or whatever, and then they see me catch myself and kind of take a breath and be like, oh, I'm being unkind and work myself out. That is what inspires us to change because we witnessed someone else walk through those fiery coals and create that shift. So I think leadership is what changes the world, and it does it because it's courageous. We do it from the inside out rather than requiring the world out there to change so that we can be happy.
It's like what Jim Rom said, that for things to change, you have to change. For things to get better, you have to get better. So I
Yes.
think that you keep emphasizing on boil it down to you as the individual. Leadership actually start with you as the individual, and I like the fact that you mentioned molded leadership. People do what people see, right?
Yes.
So if people see that this is certain, these are the ethical principles of philosophical leadership inside that Adam lives by, and they're working for him and is producing results, I want to emulate. And not because you're telling me what to do, it's because I see certain things that attract me to your way of living. I
Yes.
see certain things in you that I want to aspire to move in the direction of Adam. So like you mentioned, it all boils down to us being an example of what we want people to do. Just like people say, sometimes we don't we have to practice what we preach. So sometimes we think that making a change is you have to have millions of people to change. But what
Right.
about you start with yourself, and then with that one person who's observing you, let's say for example your son or your daughter or even your wife or even your friend, and then what you have done is you have added value or you have influenced that one individual now. Because sometimes we're so deceived that leadership is all about how many followers you have.
Typically, we kind of relate to leadership as how many followers you have or your position in a hierarchy. You know, like if you're the CEO, then you're the leader. And in fact, a really important part of leadership is your ability to lead up. And that doesn't mean that I tell my manager or my boss what they should do. It means that who I am being is a leader in the hierarchy that I find myself in. So what that could mean is like if my boss comes to me and I say good morning and they're like they just nod to me and I feel bad about that. I could be kind of a victim to that. I could be like, oh, my boss is a jerk and I don't like things and no one respects me and that kind of conversation. And that would be totally understandable. It'd be very human to have that experience. An alternative, something that a leader might do would be to say, huh, I got the sense there that my boss was upset with me. I'm going to ask them. I'm going to go to them. It takes a little bit of courage. I'm a little scared to do so, but I'm going to say, hey, I noticed I said hi. You kind of shook your head, and I'm worried that there might be something wrong or something that I've done to upset you. Is that the case? That that is an example of leading up. We're being responsible for what we notice we're feeling, and we're checking it out. We're going and engaging with it. So that kind of brings us back to this idea you can be a leader with one person, like you put it, Raheem. Like it doesn't matter who you're with. It doesn't matter how many people are around you, because again, as we shift the way we're being, our life starts to work a little bit better. When we start to choose our life and create our life from a place where we really feel empowered in it, we start to become a little magnetic. And people, like you said, they start to notice us and they start to
Yeah,
be drawn towards that. And
absolutely.
the most important part of this is that we take this stuff on not so that other people notice it and start doing it, because that's then trying to change other people. We take it on because we notice it makes our life better.
Mm,
And that's a
mm.
really selfless place to do. Or yeah, selfless is that right? I don't know if that's right, but we're doing it because it feels good for us. And then people are
Yes,
like,
yes.
wow, your life seems to be working well. And that draws them towards it too. And that's the magic of leadership.
I mean, I always tell people that there's a difference between self interest and selfishness, right? Self interest
Yes,
is you wanting the best for yourself. And there's no wrong of you wanting to better your own life, right? If you're a selfless person, you also want to share what is working for you to others. Hey,
hmm,
guys, these are some of the things that I've been implementing in my life, and they're working for me. Most times we focus on the external factors of leadership, but we neglect the internal, who we are. Like you mentioned, that leadership is actually a being. Courage, like that's an attribute of a leader. Courage, and courage is not the absence of fear.
that's
Courage
right.
is in the midst of fear,
Yes.
you're still going on.
Yeah. Well, I love that you distinguished courage that way. Like we think our idea is like, oh, courageous people just don't feel fear and they just act, but it's quite the
Mm,
opposite. People
yes.
that I notice, the people that are most courageous are often most present with their fear, and then they
Mm,
choose to step forward into it. So distinguishing doing from being can be a little tricky because it's like our being is pervasive. It pervades everything. It's everywhere around us. And so it's hard to point to. It's sort of like a fish trying to point to water. It's everywhere. There's nowhere they
mm,
can point where there isn't water. So that makes it a bit challenging. But we'll do our best here. So we could imagine, let me offer this example and we'll see if this makes sense. You can check my feet, okay? Imagine we have two people and we want to help them make better sales. And so we give them a script to follow that they're going to go through. They're going to call 100 people. We hire someone to like, you're going to call 100 people. Here's the script. And each of them goes through, and one night, those 100 people, they make 100 calls. And one person, our first person, their internal story as they're calling these people up is, I'm a bother. People don't want to hear from me. I'm only doing this to make money and I'm an embarrassment. And the other person, their internal story is, I have a lot of value to offer. This is something really important. I really believe in this product and I'm excited to share it with people. So even though they're going to do the exact same thing, their
Mm,
internal state, the way they're being as they do that thing, is going to generate drastically different results. And they could follow that same script, but you can feel the energy from them. Just in it's something transmitted that it's hard for us to get our hands around, and yet we can feel it.
mm,
And so a leader is responsible not only for what they're doing, but who am I being as I do it? What's my story going on here? How do I feel internally? Do I have emotions that are going on? All of that sort of stuff. And someone who's really masterful in leadership gets supported and takes on the kind of work that allows them to get to a place internally that is really empowering, that really has them enrolled, bought into what they're doing, really has them believe they're doing something for the greatest good, and so on.
yeah, that's actually a brilliant illustration to salesperson and
Yeah.
mindset, mindset, internalization of who you are, your identity, self belief, confidence. As you mentioned, that one person believes that I believe in this product. I believe that I can add value into this. Again, it all boils down to our individual mindset,
Yes.
our individual attitude towards how we approach things. It's
Yes.
either you approach things by faith or you approach things by fear.
Yeah. And we have, like, one of the things that I find fascinating is it's hard for us to look past what we're doing. That's what we have our eyes on, and that's what the whole world around us is focused on. Most leadership conversation is focused on, here's what you need to do as a leader. And so you can end up with, like, leaders who they're saying something that occurs very valuable. They're like, make sure you take breaks. It's really important. And that leader is also very focused on giving acknowledgement. I really want to recognize people. I want to make sure people are known. However, at the same time, that leader does not take any breaks, and every time they're given acknowledgement, they deflect it. And so what gets created in the culture there, who that leader is they're being someone who claims it's really important to take breaks and get acknowledged, but at the same time is unwilling to take breaks or get acknowledged. And
Mm,
what that creates is a whole culture, a whole organization of people who talk about one thing, but then do something that's the opposite.
mm.
And it's very pernicious. That is really toxic because it looks on the surface like, yeah, we really believe in acknowledging people and taking breaks, when what's actually happening is the opposite of that.
Mm.
And you have to be able to look below the surface to really, like, the whole of someone's being, to start to get that.
What I call the leadership language is not I, it's we.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know people say I'm self made. I don't believe in that. That's for me. I believe that you're made as a result of the people that you have around you.
Aha.
That's why we started off by saying that leadership is actually for the people, by the people.
Mm-hmm.
You, as a leader, you just have a role to play with the help of other people. And I tell people that someone started off by saying that leadership is actually for the people, by the people.
Mm-hmm.
You, as a leader, you just have a role to play with the help of other people. Someone's superiority over you does not diminish your significance.
Yes.
Just because you are superior, because you're the manager in that department, doesn't mean that your employees are less significant. In order for you
No,
to
not at all.
produce that result, you need your employees. So this idea of we as a whole, yes, when issues arise, the leaders take the blame. When
Hmm.
we win, it's everybody. That
Right.
just naturally happens. If there's any messed up, blame the coach, blame the CEO, blame the president. If
Right.
there's any win, it should involve all of us.
Hmm.
So this leads me to how important is teamwork in leadership. If leaders are wise, they will value people and create a leadership environment where they can empower everybody, that everybody can also lead in their own area, in their own gifts, in their own potential, and in their own personality.
Uh-huh. Well, I think it's like there's like a almost like a polarity or a duality here. So the first thing I would say is, one of the things that makes leadership so challenging for us is that it's the leader's job always to look on their side of the fence first. And when we hear that, what we usually do is we're like, oh, this person on my team is doing this. Is there something I need to look at? And then we spend like 30 seconds. We're like, no. Okay, great. I did what Adam told me to do. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the leader's job is to look like, oh, someone on my team keeps showing up late. How am I showing up that is allowing that, that is creating that thing happening? So it's not a question of am I or am I not? It's how am I contributing to this?
Mm,
And the leader must always bring that work back here first and foremost. So in that regard, it's almost like there's almost like an I-ness to it as opposed to teamwork. But then to your point, from that place, once the leader's done their own work, the job is to come back and to create leaders out of your team. Like the job of a leader is to create more leaders.
mm,
And so um, the way I like to invite leaders to look at it is how the leader is being is how the team is being. So if we
mm,
notice something's going on in the team, oh, the whole team, they seem to talk over each other in the meeting. Great. How are you showing up as a leader that's causing that?
mm.
And so that way, the focus is on the team, but the work for the leader is first and foremost there with themselves, and then they can bring it back to the team after they've done the challenging work here, because it is challenging. It's not fun
Yeah.
to look on our side. It's easier to
Yes.
point. You should
Yes.
do
Yes.
this, right? That's much more satisfying.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's so
Yeah.
true. So before we conclude, I want you to tell young entrepreneurs uh, that leadership matters.
Well, I'm always hesitant to give advice because I don't want to tell
Okay.
people what to do, but I can share, like, here's what I've noticed in my own life, which is I'm pretty reliable to like grind. If I need to, I learned growing up, I'm willing to do hard work. The thing that leadership and like being supported to develop my leadership and to step into transformation, the thing that's provided me is the opportunity to look beyond that and start to ask myself the question like, hey, am I enjoying what I'm doing? And one of the things that's amazing about a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, is our willingness to like, we'll do whatever it takes. We'll walk the hard road. We'll walk through fire, but we're not so good at stopping and saying, hold on, am I actually enjoying this? And instead, the conversation we get into with ourselves is like, I'm willing to do this because 3, 5, however many years down the road, then it'll be good. But if that's the game we're playing in life, our life basically becomes like, I'm willing for life to suck because eventually it'll be good. And that's not really how most of us would choose to live our life.
Mm,
Most of us, given the choice, would be like, no, I want to enjoy life.
mm,
And I'll walk through a bit of the fire, but like by and large, I'd like to be enjoying my life. And so I would assert most entrepreneurs are willing to grind because they don't believe it can be any different. They believe that's what they have to do to get the rewards that they
yeah.
want.
Yeah.
And I would just invite people to really like, um, if what if it could be different, to start from that, and like if it was possible to really enjoy what you were doing and create the rewards, then would you settle for grinding, or would you start to look down the path of like, well, hold on, how could I actually enjoy myself more? Because entrepreneurship is a beautiful thing to do and it can be really rich, and people that are following that path deserve to have fun. They deserve to enjoy what they're doing.
Mm,
So this ultimately is like a heartfelt wish that entrepreneurs, young and old, get the gift of loving their life minute by minute rather
mm.
than when they've arrived at the destination.
Taking care of himself, right? Just
Yes,
wait until they achieve a particular milestone. That's when they will enjoy life, right? Enjoying the process as you go along. Wow.
exactly. You nailed it. Yeah.
So, Adam, can you tell the audience how they can connect with you?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So the easiest place to connect with me is Facebook. You can search for my name, Adam Quiney, Quiney. I post a lot of my art there, which by which I mean just like the expression of myself in the world. And I also have a podcast called Get Lit, Getlit. And I've got a book. It's the third book I've written, and it's launching September 12th. And it's called Who Do You Think You Are? So
Mm,
if people are kind of curious about exploring leadership through the lens that you and I have been talking about today, that book is really providing a framework for people to kind of step into that and put it into operation as opposed to just thinking about it.
thank you so much, Adam, for your time, for the wonderful insight that you have provided to the audience.